My fleet grew and was upgraded in the orbital shipyards of Ryza, and in these 6 months I received 10 brand new Los Angeles pattern missile destroyers, hastily converted from nearly completed hulls already in production. With 30 torpedoes prepared in their launch blocks, a single such destroyer should be able to cripple or destroy even a battlecruiser. They have also started testing those system-only corvettes, and even produced about 30 of them, using them as test beds for the large numbers of STC templates they have just received. My own forces were upgraded with 16 Stormblade heavy tanks, 400 armed sentinels with multi-melter sidearms, and 4,000 upgraded Hydra tanks, each with extra ceramite armor and a multi-melter remote control gun for close defense, beside the twin anti-air multi-lasers. Hydras were amazing against air and land targets with thinner armor, and since air cover was always lacking I had to provide my own. Also because in this time one of the continents of Ryza had been cleared of orcs, 4 Katakan regiments, about 80,000 guardsmen, and about 500 Ogrins for special duties were donated to my own fleet. Sadly, I was refused the pattern for an Emanatus_Force_field, although the fabricator did install these amazing shields on my heavy tanks and armored gunships. The hard way it will be then, scanning every micron of the device and then selling variants to other Forged Worlds. Nearly 1 million servitors were transferred to my fleet, and everything was repaired and upgraded, to a small degree. This was not Antax, and they wouldn't let me demand the sky and the moon at the first meeting. But I was promised a few more capital ships, and the Universe Conveyor Carrier upgrade and refit, sometime in the future. Perhaps in a century. My transport ships were filled with lasguns, flak jackets, helmets, backpacks, boots and other Astra Militarum supplies, since I did have 1,000 PDF regiments planned for my empire's defense. By the time my transports and a few escorts departed for Alivar, and my own fleet towards Forge World Shenlong, that crash-talk battleship was still kept intact but grounded. Ryza was surely faking being invaded, because I had a fearful puppy crying beside my bed, which meant the Space Wolves considered my tunneling plan viable, but were not allowed to proceed. Ludvius has also recovered from his injuries, and was given a refractor_field to guard me better. They didn't give me one, which kinda made me sad. Luckily, I had a few hundred Katakan concubines drafted for a new sacred duty, and they kept me busy and rather satisfied, in bed. Strong in body, and very fast, also funny accents all of them, but I didn't let Decima discriminate on that account. Only loyalty and fertility. However, no Origin females were available, and I would need to travel to one of their frigid homeworlds to recruit a stock of superhumanly large Amazons. Majoris was busy buying my new regiment's loyalty by crafting Devil's Claw pattern combat knives from our salvaged adamantium, first for the commanders, then sergeants and then lower ranks. The Ogren were being implanted with Savant and Remembrancer nodes, and covered in fatigues made of flak jacket material with armor plates pockets, which will also be filled with adamantium armor plates. For the Katakans I tried the same type of armor, but the silly jungle savages preferred thin tank tops, to show off muscles and tattoos. If my destination was under attack, like the astropaths claimed, then as every Forge world the climate would not sustain jungles, or even breathing. Some sort of Krieg type of covering might be needed. For the combat servitors as well. I launched a final duty into the new concubine and ran for the shower and then the ship's armory. Like I suspected, there wasn't enough flak material for 1 million servitors. Not even for 100,000. Barely 90,000 sets of coveralls could be made, just enough for my new jungle regiments. Those Ryza tech priests in charge of logistics possibly didn't even consider protecting the servitors against bullets or harsh weather. Can we craft more plasteel plates for at least 100,000 combat servitors? I asked in a tired breath. Majoris blinked and blurted some Banharak to his engineers. Perhaps 20,000 suits, with what we have on board. Also, I suggest we do not waste precious adamantium on mere servitors, Captain. At most, 1,000 solid shields for the first ranks to board an enemy ship. When they die, those behind them can be programmed to pick up the fallen shield and advance. I thought for a minute and agreed. Forge Shenlong will probably replenish the dead servitors anyway, and we also had a lot of them right now. Good enough then. And we need to craft adamantium weapons for the Ugrin. The shaft can be as thin as we can get away with, or even better, hollow. But the head has to be an Aquila with two heads, like a double axe. We can stamp a simple pattern, right? I wondered without thinking too much. As you say, Captain. I would recommend stamped armor plates as well, if you want to be ready when the fleet arrives. The tech priest replied, producing a sampling box with plates of various quality of add-on armor. Sure, the handcrafted models looked great and would likely be more resilient, but I wasn't going to a ball. Pretty looking plates for officers, and stamped plates for everyone else. Perhaps even for your own tech priests, if they are part of the boarding teams. Their knowledge should not be lost to accident. I ordered and turned around, bouncing off a grinning Astartes. I'm not an officer, Lord Peth. Just a meager sergeant. He complained like a child. Well, he did have a point. Fine. Pretty stuff for sergeants too, I yelled and saw Ludvius holding his thumb up for success. Damn man-child. He had power armor already and the fancy shield that could block tank fire. I continued my march to check the bridge, then the Gela generators. The armed sentinels tracked my approach, and the Void Marines confirmed my identity twice before I could inspect my own damn ship. But I wouldn't change those orders, and even instructed the Marines to shoot anyone looking like me, without an Astartes bodyguard with him. Shapeshifters were possible after all, and losing the Gela fields inside the warp to a saboteur wouldn't be quite healthy. You think the angel would return if we call, my lord? Ludvius asked in a reverent voice as I turned off the stasis field for another check on my family and friends, here in the future. I'm certain he will, my friend. Already the transformation has reached my shoulder. In a few years, we will be brothers, by blood, I mused out loud, then focused on Jiren. Hello, mentor. It is Peth. The space wolves gave me a puppy. I began my mental link. Always start the connection with something true but seeming absurd. My mentor knew me quite well. Why am I not that surprised, my pupil? I take it you saved Forge Riser by accident. Or so my archmagos said in the last dispatch. Jiren replied, seeming amused. This wasn't quite right. Accidents don't shoot people. We didn't fire lances and torpedoes by accident, dear tech priest. But we were lucky to emerge from warp at an advantageous angle. Yes, yes. Lucky as always, young Peth. I am returning to Antax, even though the exploration at Anvilus is still ongoing, with a new leader. You know why? He asked me a bit rhetorically. I suspect because the Lament is finished upgrading and Antax has sufficient ships for a bigger expedition. And you are an explorer Magus now. I replied curtly. I didn't dare blurt out words like STC over a long-distance call. I see you're learning. Sorry again for Justine, although I say it was worth it. It's rare that a mortal can strike such a deadly blow to the enemy. He added as a parting gift. He was right, of course. It still hurt, and the chaos would still corrupt others. Plus I wasn't fully certain the serpent was dead. Too many chaos champions had been resurrected by their patrons. Then I decided to take a risk, minor as it may be. I searched for a certain Necron world, till I located Solemnus and Ventress in the Infinite. Quick question, Necron Lord. Is your fulgrim getting stronger? I asked with a cautious mental transmission. In a few seconds, a mental image of the Necron mage appeared in my mind. Oh? Someone has figured out how to operate the ancient sender? I shrugged mentally. Is that your important question you desire as a trade? I suppose not. My fulgrim, huh? So the serpent demon is dead? Or is that how you can be certain? The ancient lich wondered to himself. I declined to answer, because I knew there will be a big trade to follow. Paranoid, but I like it. Let me check. Conversion, stasis, there. Measuring psychic output. Now this is peculiar. Half of his soul has grown indeed. I'd say the original has been split, and now the power is returning to the familiar body. I wonder what kind of weapon can split a soul in two. He mused to himself, while no doubt examining his fulgrim clone with arcane devices. I'm getting tired, Necron Lord. Ask me the question, I demanded more abruptly. Right. A fair trade, even after learning the answer. We should really meet one day. Wait, my question. How did you know about me? He asked in a rather self-serving manner. You were defending Cadia, when the Black Crusade cracked the planet apart. The plans worked as well. You were just too late. Too hesitant, even after the galaxy broke in two. I answered with a sad voice. I see now. You're trying to make me act. Not your puppet, whoever you are. The Necron complained half mad. I thought for a minute. You did act, Trazyn. And you will act again. Last time, you were alone. I'll see what rare item I can offer. A Catan shard, nah. You should have won already. Astartes, you have too many anyway. How about a demon Primarch? Nah, Fulgrim, wait, the Tau have this chronoblade. Can make anyone immortal. But you are already, I don't know. Maybe some Dark Eldar stuff? Nice things are hard to find. I muttered in a rambling kind of way. No, wait. There is such thing as a chronoblade? The Tau are too backwards to invent something of that level. A Catan shard is valuable too. And that Primarch, you have the other Fulgrim? We should really trade. I rarely find anything nice, Trazyn demanded a bit more eager. I smiled inward. The hook was deeply caught. Don't call me, I'll call you. But you'll know me easily when we meet. I have a puppy. I sent with some effort and ended the call. Then I engaged the stasis field again, and went to bed. The puppy jumped on my left arm and went to sleep as well. Good senses on that wolf. I continued my normal schedule, crafting fake STCs, making babies and inspecting the troops. Taking the puppy with me made me more popular, for some strange reason. His name was now Canis, the High Gothic for dog. Keeping things simple worked best, and I had enough balls in the air to juggle already. The second our fleet translated into real space, sensors and auguries switched to autistic mode. Then, we burned plasma at maximum and turned away, as exactly above us there were a dozen of the famous Universe-class mass conveyors, only decorated with the hated spikes of chaos. I had 10 destroyers and 8 corvettes, and my slightly more durable Canticle. But closer in system there was the siege fleet from Garmk, the Dark Mechonicus Hellforge in the Maelstrom. Of course, we didn't simply run away. We had torpedoes and were not afraid to use them. One by one, the new Los Angeles pattern destroyers launched their ship-killing salvos, each of them aimed at a different troop transport. For no doubt, these were the Titans, demon engines and other dark machine transport vessels, with the needed ammunition and fuel and food and everything else a force expecting to besiege a forge world would need. The Canticle and the corvettes unloaded on the 11th conveyor, torpedoes and lance batteries, bombardment cannons and volcano lance batteries. The Los Angeles destroyers simply turned at 90 degrees to allow their own batteries to fire, and then the explosions began. First the Chaos Flak batteries firing too late at our torpedoes, then the torpedoes striking the enemy void shields, then the hull and finally the reactor and munition depots. 11 new suns appeared at Shenlong, far behind the gas giant. The explosions were so powerful we lost our void shields even this far away, and the iron shields barely saved us. Somehow, the corvettes got away easy, riding the shockwaves like leaves in a storm. The destroyers suffered worse, and reports of massive damage filled the clan's Vox channel. The Canticle was shaken so strongly that I had to use my armor's servo motors to hold on to the command chair, and many bridge officers were flung out of their seats. It would have been nasty in the lower decks, but I didn't have time to pity the serfs and servitors right now. Torpedo room, time to reload? I asked in a command voice. Captain, full reload estimated at 714 minutes with current effectives. Most of the gunnery crews and some engineers are wounded or dead. The voice replied on the Vox. Not the usual torpedo guy as well. Must be really messy in there, torpedoes bouncing around and crushing people. Understood, help will arrive soon. Meanwhile, load only the Vortex warhead in the sealed cell, row 0888. Not the other one, I shouted in the Vox box. Roger that, Captain. Vortex not bicycle warhead, aye. The voice answered, seeming amused if also in pain. I almost sighed and glared at Majoris. He waved a few tentacles to show he was sorry for gossiping. Or make fun of me. Replacement servitors and 100 tech priests and medics to torpedo room. Lance batteries repairs secondary. Engines and shields tertiary. The rest can wait, I demanded while checking damage on my bridge. Broken bones and lacerations weren't too bad. The woman at long-range Auspex console was dead. Neck broken, seemed like. My ship's escorts began speeding away, trying to enter the huge cargo ship's dead weapon zone in the aft. I had some distant uncle in command of those destroyer escorts, and he knew his job. Cripple the engines and we could come back later to finish them off. The Chaos Behemoth still had engine power, but was very slow to turn, due to starting from an immobile position. The Canticle still had our last vector, aiming us outward. We wouldn't have 12 hours for my vortex torpedo to be loaded, even with the injured Behemoth failing to turn yet. Air Wing, any fighter operational right now? I asked without much hope. No fighters for a few hours, Captain. There's an intact shuttle though. Somehow. The wing commander answered after a few moments. It would have to do. Prepare it for vortex deployment. We have a 12 kilometers long Chaos ship just above us. I spoke and glanced at Ludvius. He showed me 4 fingers, which I didn't know what. Never mind. Just act, don't think. I was doing fine then. I leaned back and scrolled through the howling machine spirit's demands for fury and vengeance. The Geller field was broken. There would be no retreat then. In death ground, fight, I said softly, and immediately the bridge became quiet. You wish us to board the conveyor, Captain? Wenchen asked in near horror. They have a Titan Legion aboard, Wenchen. We have one night. I replied, shaking my head. A single shuttle too. Perhaps that Legion was not complete or fully operational, but it wouldn't matter. I switched the Vox channel back to the flight deck. ETA on the shuttle? We're moving, sir. Perhaps 1 hour, maybe 2. The man replied in a suffering voice. The Canticle ran the calculations for me. 1 hour would work, 2 hours would be probably too late. Damn my luck. Uncle Jorias began firing at the conveyor soon after, and one engine blew up after some 10 minutes of intense low-damage fire from all the escorts. Then again, one engine on that monster was larger than a destroyer. Our timer grew, adding more lifetime for the ship. Auspex scans detected, Captain. They might be preparing to teleport aboard. Our ion shield cannot prevent transdimensional transports, Majoris announced from his own console. Ludvius stepped closer to me, one hand on his bolter. Thracius just leaned on the wall and seemed relaxed. Very well then. A bitter fight it was. Battle stations. Prepare to receive orders. Deploy armored units in hallways. Snipers, report to armory for phased ammunition. If those Chaos Marines or Sorcerers dared to come, I was slightly prepared now. Phase iron-tipped bolter rounds would ruin their fancy ruinous powers. My skin tingled as something deflected from the refractor shield up into the ceiling. A single shot from Thracius and the assassin melted into burning goo. Astartes were great, if they were watching my back. You may begin praying, everyone. This will be slightly unpleasant, I commanded just as the first lance battery came online. With my eyes closed, I guided the Canticle to fire towards the opening hangar doors on the conveyor. Something exploded inside, then something else. I fired again, just to make sure. A bigger explosion, and the void filled with burning demon fighters and melted armors. Another engine exploded from our escorts, and I decided to call the corvettes back as a protective screen. The timing would be close, but even just the destroyers would suffice to cripple a few more engines. But if a horde of fighters and bombers arrived, the Canticle would be in more trouble. Teleports detected around the engine and reactor rooms. Sentinels and Hydras have engaged the enemy. The tech priest announced with a dispassionate voice. Well, the reactor would be an obvious target. And that's why I had armor posted there. Navigator quarters under attack. And, it's over. Lord Holborn is a pyrokinetic as well. The Magus reported somewhat amused. Although we had guards posted there too, in truth a navigator with skill was worth a dozen tanks, at once. Medical quarters now. Lady Helena has good aim with that heavy bolter. Lady Catherine sings louder than the roar of a heavy flamer. And our sweet Katakans have wired the door with a melter bomb, Majoris said with a tiny snort. Even Ludvius chuckled a little, then swung his power maul at something invisible. The squelch of broken bones and crushed organs informed me he did not miss. Another melter gun shot incinerated the remains before they reformed. Then all the lance batteries sprang back up, and I began enjoying the battle a little more. The Canticle fired furiously, starting fires and explosions onto the exposed Chaos conveyor, hangars and barracks being lit up with continent-erasing beams. If this could last, just our numerous batteries would be sufficient to ignite the whole ship. I tried, I really did. Fuel depots, munitions bunkers, fighter bays. I targeted anything that could propagate farther inward. But just as my destroyers blew up another engine on the conveyor, its void shield came back up. I held fire now, and simply waited for my corvettes to get in formation, then fired sporadically at any opening. But whoever was in charge of the enemy transport wasn't stupid. He gathered more forces, and launched a big wave of bombers and assault shuttles. The Canticle marked the bombers as more dangerous, but I disagreed. Torture for eternity was a worse fate than a fiery death. I marked the landers for priority defense and began picking them off a dozen at a time. The corvettes fired on the bombers instead, using point defense or main batteries as fast as possible. Huge melter bombs fell towards my ship, but there had to have been entire regiments in those landers. I was almost worth it. With a lurch, our engine came online and we accelerated, then our void shield came back as well. I urged the ship in a high-energy turn, dodging most of the bombs or leaving them behind. Teleport diverted in our wake. Oh. It was something big, too bad it will intersect that melter bomb. Majoris commented like it was a gladiator match. Already fried by our plasma engines, the Titanic winged construct took a melter bomb straight on and burst into hellish flames. I urged the Canticle to finish it off, and with 10 lances it died, sending a pulse of warp energies and screaming souls outward in a huge nova. Was that thing someone familiar? I asked to make sure. Yes, Lord Pef. That was Lorga, the Primarch of the Word-Bearers Traitors. Ludvius told me with a pat on my head. I sighed inward. There was a demon prince howling for my blood now. Or will be, as soon as he got respawned back in hell. Lorga wasn't so tough, I declared in a small voice. Really, he died like in 2 seconds. I kinda expected a Primarch to be stronger. Captain, the shuttle is ready to launch. The flight deck declared loudly, as the bridge was kinda silent for some reason. Blow their reactor, and try not to die, I ordered the pilot. Sure thing, Daddy. By the way, I skinned my elbow earlier. Learn how to drive a damn ship. My daughter Larisa admonished me, with the whole bridge listening. I sobbed and leaned back in my chair. My reputation was ruined now. As soon as the Vortex missile hit the Chaos mass conveyor, its reactor exploded and split the immense troop transport in two, opening up a warp rift much too wide for such a small warhead. Damn warp shenanigans. I ordered the escorts to fire on the rift, while my lance batteries scoured the unprotected hulk and its furiously screaming cargo. Chaos Titans, Baneblades, Chaos Knights, Land Raiders, entire Chaos Marines companies, millions of traitor guardsmen, cultists and thousands of corrupted types of Mechanicus automata. It was a shooting gallery, with row after row of carefully placed miniatures of every deck. And that ship had 1,000 decks. My lance batteries had battlecruiser strength, like all the Overlord-class battlecruisers, but it still took hours to vaporize all the contents of that ship, while my escorts struggled to close the rift and defend the Canticle from emerging demons. Meanwhile, I had the small Geller generators from the Stormbirds removed and placed in key locations to protect vital areas from those demons that survived the escort fire. Nearly everyone on board had to fight or at least support someone shooting at the boarding demons, my Ogrins and the armed Sentinel Walkers providing the bulk of the melee defense, and the Katakans, the Servitors and the Tech Priests forming the second line of defense. Majoris had gone to fix the main Geller generator, with more high-ranking Mechanicus priests and a spare astropath. The poor guy did not return, and I wouldn't even ask what the Tech Priests did with his flesh and soul. Still, an improvised Geller field sprang back over the Canticle an hour later, so it was worth it. The crew and regiment losses grew once more, and my heart broke, because my Void Marine concubines had been killed defending the nursery, alongside many of the Katakan concubines who were superb warriors as well. The blank aura of my concubines and the few blank babies helped them resist long enough for a Katakan battalion to arrive with flamethrowers and melter guns, saving the kids and more than half of my harem. Someone or something must have been quite irate with me, to target my kids, born or unborn. A dozen times Canis alerted the defenders to the presence of a sneakier demon, crawling through a vent or phasing through a wall. When Majorus returned to the bridge, I had a solution already. Not all the phase iron had been used to create phased ammunition. Majorus, I have 100 kilograms of phase iron in the vault. Could you turn that into a metal mesh and glue it to the ship's walls? The Magus blinked and stared into the void, considering my request. I could, Lord Pef. But I don't have the tools or the time for such a finesse and consuming enterprise. Slicing off a centimeter for a bolt around is very different from spooling micron-thin wires for a mesh. Perhaps a rough job, millimeter-thin wires and repurposing the flak armor knitting device, with 1,000 hours of holy litanies and data sequencing. Okay, this is not urgent, as there is a Geller field over us right now. But as you saw, combat damage is unpredictable, and I want to be prepared for the next time. I answered him, then concentrated back on the damned warp rift, with all the Canticle's batteries. Just before the rift closed, one of the damaged destroyers turned and accelerated away without notice. Escorts, immobilize and board the defector. I ordered at once. Stay away, countdown, for the Emperor. A crackling voice emerged from the vox box on the bridge, then the infested destroyer started powering up its warp engine. Open fire, all batteries, I yelled and urged the Canticle to track mutineer and fire. The outward rift opened and 1,000 white tendrils emerged from it, capturing the doomed warship and withstanding our lance batteries for too long, drawing the destroyer into the warp. I've heard of such creatures, called enslavers. Denizens of the immaterium, they followed conflict and preyed on injured vessels, just like now. Possibly another nice gift left by the old ones, just like the orcs and other exotic races crafted to fight the Catan and the Necrons. A salvo of plasma rounds from the corvettes ignited the enslaver while my lances closed the rift, shearing the giant creature in half. Then the destroyer's reactor detonated, and the huge plasma and shrapnel fireball scorched the enslaver to the bone, leaving only a dozen-meter long and quite thin bones floating listless. I wasn't sure how it could work, but it seemed in real space the creature was much smaller than inside the warp. Its bones would be very valuable though. Flight bridge, prepare a shuttle for me. I spoke on the dedicated Vox channel, and glanced at Ludvius. I can go collect those enslaver bones for you, Captain, he uttered with a frown. I know you could, Astartes. But I am immune to the warp, and you're not. Perhaps that phase iron mesh could be inserted inside your armor or under your skin, one day. I mused in a thoughtful voice. Majorus glanced from me to my bodyguard and back. Let's not get ahead that far, my lords. We don't even have a simple mesh, let alone an organic compatible bio-upgrade. Though it would be quite thin and durable, even at micron size. Astartes' biology is also very different and it might reject such an implant, or interfere with the black carapace. Right, not something we could do hastily aboard a damaged ship anyway. Using a disposable pilot servitor, I flew out and collected the bones with my power armor serving as space suit, finding them too heavy and resisting movement with my right hand, but easy to wave around with my blessed left hand. Were they bending gravity somehow? My left hand was only 3 times stronger, not 100 times. More weird warp magic. After we docked back on the Canticle, I tested the bone's effectiveness on the pilot, and found out the enslaver bone worked quite similar to a power weapon, crushing the cyborg as easily as crumbling a newspaper. With that, the risk of a warp infiltration into the exposed pilot was also eliminated. So I went to have a chat with the resident psyker on my ship, the navigator. He kept me waiting a minute, then emerged dressed in red and black robes, ornated with glowing runes, and wearing a necklace with the Imperial Aquila on it, only the eagle's eyes were glowing gold. I've seen other navigators, but this guy seemed very rich. Maybe richer than me. I didn't have holy relics to wear around. Lord Hulburn, excellent job with the warp emergence. We caught the traitors with their pants down, I began, praising his skill from the start. The man muttered something and avoided looking at me. Not my doing, Captain. The warp currents shifted a second before we emerged. Like an invisible hand pushed the fleet into the right place and time. So it had been a turn of fate, like I suspected. Anyways, good job frying the pests that assailed your quarters. Now, what can you tell me about this enslaver bone? I asked, holding the bone for inspection. Leave it in midair, Captain, and step aside. Your aura is distorting my readings, he demanded. I did as asked, and the bone remained floating parallel to the deck. The navigator opened his third eye and gazed at the bone, taking care not to look at me. A young Empyrean, not yet 1,000,000 years old. Stupid too, by the looks of it. Hunting alone, without a pack. The bone can be used for weapons or maybe a mind shield, if you find a tech priest with the right knowledge, or maybe a bone singer elder. There is one in the system already, aboard that cruiser shadowing us. Lord Holburn explained in patient voice. This guy must be really skilled, to discern so many things with only a minute long reading. Then again, battle cruisers were rare and expensive. Made sense. Ryza hired a good navigator for the Canticle. I see. And what happened on that destroyer, can you tell me? I wondered with a smaller voice. The Empyrean was hunting and found a silly navigator without proper mental defenses. The rest is rather tedious, gruesome and terrible to divulge. But you have handled the crisis well, Captain. I wish you good fortune when you engage the siege fleet at Shenlong. The navigator muttered in a slightly less upset voice, and entered his shielded quarters again. Wait, is it safe to carry around? I muttered in a dejected voice. Go away, Captain. Your luck makes me sick to the stomach. Came a shout from inside the shielded rooms. All right then. Probably safe on my person, but would need a specialist to convert it into a proper artifact. And the damned Eldar were keeping an eye on Forge Shenlong, waiting for something to happen. Something other than my unexpected arrival. Someone else would be coming. Knowing my luck, it could be a Navy fleet, another Inquisitor, or an entire Space Marine chapter. So I grabbed the floating bone, then I returned to the shuttle hangar and collected all the bones under my left arm, and deposited them in my adamantium armored vault, for another day. Then a feeling alerted me. Almost like. Come out, Ludvius, I said gently, and my bodyguard emerged from a hidden corner. Good. You're learning, Lord Peth, he exclaimed with a slight snort. It wasn't just that. I knew he would be near. Either my brain jumped a few scales and reached Inquisitor levels, or the blood connected us more than it seemed. I felt you, my friend. We are close to that empathic amplifier here. I mused to myself, and headed towards the torpedo room to check the damage and repair progress. You too? He answered in surprise. Is it the same with other Blood Angels? I asked, curious. A little bit, yes. Nothing this tangible, not even with the chapter master or the librarians, he admitted with a frown. But the feeling is stronger when there are more you present? I asked just before reaching the torpedo room door, and got my identity checked again. Right. Just like that, the entire second company would feel similar. How did you know? He asked in surprise. I just shook my head. I didn't know, but I suspected. Well, now I knew, after Ludvius confirmed his own experience. The Blood Angels were coming to Shenlong. It made sense, as Forge Worlds did depend on rapid Astartes deployments for defense. Same thing happened with Antax, Astobon, and Ryza. Inside the torpedo room, there were no more wounded or corpses, as the Mechanicus made use of organic tissues for every machinery. Servitors and machine spirits, the victims would keep serving the Omnissiah, even in death. Probably for the best, considering what the afterlife was, around here. The Eldar used a similar approach, with their infinity circuits, the case having your soul enter the warp would mean eternal torture or worse. Captain. We will be fully loaded and prepared to fire in an hour. Excuse the mess and the blood spatter. A jovial engine seer exclaimed as he spotted me inspecting the damaged walls and conveyor belts. I nodded and patted his shoulder. You're in charge here. But, no more bicycle rumors, I whispered in fake secrecy. The man grinned and wiped his greasy hands on a dirty towel. I heard you killed a traitor Primarch, Captain. He asked a bit too loud and patted my own armored shoulder. I shrugged. His demon wings didn't help. I just shot Lorgar a few times and he exploded. The flesh is weak. The tech priests around began chanting praises to Omnissiah and showered me with sanctified oil. Ha! You hear that, crew? The flesh is weak, ha ha ha. Now back to work and stop gawking at the captain. We have more traitors to kill. The man yelled, then pointed at his stupefied engineers and gun crew. They all rushed back to work, so this guy will work well enough as torpedo master. Ludvius chuckled and escorted me outside. I admit, I was skeptical when you became my charge, Lord Pef. But I feel you'll be doing fine. Not that many Primarchs might survive once you grow up a bit. I grit my teeth. I'm not a puppy. Canis is the puppy. I muttered in defeat and accepted another head pat. Cleaning up the void of infectious or tainted hull bits and machine parts took us another day, and my destroyers were tasked to push the larger fragments onto a trajectory leading into the sun. Emergency systems repair or crew limb replacements continued throughout the fleet, and I was glad for having so many tech priests and servitors on board, ready to donate the missing limb to a much more valuable crew or guardsman. I also had to stop my regular schedule and invigorate the ship with visits and rousing speeches. Morale was important, even more so when fighting the chaos. But we did emerge victorious against overwhelming odds, and the escorts were somewhat resupplied from the Canticle's torpedo stores. Easy to do for the corvettes, as only 2 of them carried torpedo tubes, the rest using plasma cannons. We didn't have 270 torpedoes to supply all the destroyers, but I managed to provide 6 torpedoes to each of them. More than a regular Cobra pattern had, anyway. A squadron of fighters was also repaired and prepared for launch, and a host of other departments got some tech priest care, like the medical ward, kitchens and sensors. Fleet effectiveness at 65%, Captain. We can start our attack run if you wish, though the traitors will be aware and prepared for us, Wenshin pronounced as I returned to my captain's seat. Margus, see that safety belts are installed on the bridge seats and other critical areas. We don't have many expendable crew left, I demanded, pointing at Majoris. The tech priest turned to look at the Auspex console, where a flight cadet had replaced the dead officer. Very wise, Captain. It will be done, using flak jacket material for the belts. Bridge first, of course. He answered with a flurry of Benharic commands to his subordinate priests. Permission to flare our long-range auguries? The cadet asked in a timid voice. I thought for a second, then denied it. Don't want to scare off the Eldar. They might provide a distraction for the great enemy. In this, every species in the galaxy were allies of necessity. Necrons, Tyranids or Eldar, even Orcs, the Dark Eldar and the Tau. Everyone shot at Chaos first, if they had any common sense. Of course, they would shoot at humans just as well, but perhaps after the enemy had been vanquished. The Imperium lacked such common sense, and often targeted everyone at the same time, proving a lack of critical thinking among most admirals, inquisitors, and Astartes. The rogue traders were a different breed, and were slightly more reluctant to shoot at someone they may need to trade with. We began a series of short bursts of acceleration and course changes, to deny the invaders a proper vector to intercept my fleet. Sure, I intended to arrive behind the Chaos fleet and enact surprise suppository treatment, but they saw us from half a system away, and were quite wary, since we did blow up the landing forces. So, a segment of their fleet detached from the besieging orbit, and moved to intercept a whole battleship, 3 cruisers and 20 destroyers. But retreat wasn't an option, as it would leave the Forge world at their mercy, and a new landing army could always arrive from the nearby Maelstrom. When encircled, use stratagems, I said in a calm voice, and looked around the bridge. Nobody said anything, too used at getting amazing victory plans from their captain. Ask the Eldar for help? The cadet muttered in a shaky voice. I sighed audibly and leaned back. Doesn't work like that, my young friend. You show weakness, they kill you. But, perhaps providing them with an opportunity for glory will work. Their ship captains are just as idiots as the Navy. I answered while thinking hard how to achieve that. The Eldar would prefer to stalk from above the planetary plane, so if I sent the fleet downwards, the Chaos ships would expose their engines to Eldar fire, by turning their front and prow armor towards us. Torpedo corvettes, stop accelerating and swing around to strike from our right. I ordered with a sad voice. It will probably mean their deaths, 2 corvettes with 4 torpedoes.
Roger that, Captain Peth. Opportunity fire or designated targets?
A cousin of mine spoke on the Vox, as the 2 ships fell behind.
It will depend on what the enemy does.
But a cruiser or 2 crippled will be the best result I can expect, I said and turned the Vox channel off. Then I turned to see Wenchen gone pale and clenching his fists.
Oh, that guy was his son, nasty business. Don't worry, Wenchen. We will all die, one day. But how we die is what matters. It is the strength of humanity, to draw power from sacrifice, I told him gently.
The old veteran sighed and began breathing a bit calmer.
Yes, Captain. But perhaps not today. Perhaps not today. But all men die, I concluded on a somber tone. Majoris immediately proved his common sense. But the machine is immortal. Only the flesh is weak.
I chuckled at his words, although they were rather true. Trazyn, the Necron Lord, was living proof of his faith.
Not that I contemplated that approach yet.
Perhaps the Eldar way,
if I could one day get access to the right circuits.
Saving your soul and getting reborn on a new path seemed rather nice, compared to Necrodermis or the machine spirits of the Mechanicus. Then again, humanity already had its own immortality path, joining the Emperor's angels or his Legion of the Damned. On the ship's holoscreen the autistic auguries reported the Chaos Fleet splitting off again, sending a cruiser and 2 destroyers after the sacrificial offering. Task Force 2, dive and force them to turn. I provided my order to the few torpedo corvettes, while the Canticle Spirit murmured prayers and vectors for every ship in the fleet, directly into my mind. Yorvis, begin dive with your escorts now, I demanded from my uncle. The Canticle kept accelerating in a slightly zigzag manner, until we reached torpedo range with the Chaos battleship. Torpedo room, full salvo and secure yourself for aftershocks. Yellow alert, entire ship. I ordered as our battle cruiser lurched from losing the mass of the departing torpedoes. We didn't have more vortex torpedoes, but just this one should be sufficient if it wasn't intercepted. And since the leading enemy admiral has split off his Chaos destroyers to engage my own, he wouldn't have much chance of an intercept. Indeed, the leading 5 plasma torpedoes were shot down too early, but we could launch 8 at one time. Their void shield faltered for a second as 2 capital-class torpedoes struck in head-on, and the vortex torpedo passed through the floor and detonated at the impact with the battleship's hull. Immediately, a large warp rift emerged and devoured half the enemy battleship, setting fires and infesting it with more demons. The Canticle began to slowly veer around, trying to find a spot where we could fire without getting mauled by the surviving batteries on the battleship. At this moment, the Auspex sensors flared in warning. Xenoholofield scrambled high above our transversal plane. We detect energy emissions. Eldar lances. The cadet yelled in excitement. I just nodded and focused on my task, waiting for another torpedo salvo to reload and the lance batteries of the Canticle to get into effective range. Objective achieved, Lord Peth. Engines to full. My cousin shouted victoriously on the Vox, as his target was hit by 3 torpedoes and the Eldar lances finished it off. Targeting enemy cruisers. Torpedoes away. Executing high-energy turn. My uncle Yorvis added as his escorts unloaded their own surprise gifts on the Chaos cruisers. My escorts were all running away now, with 20 Chaos destroyers chasing after their blood and souls. Transmission incoming from Eldar cruiser, Captain. Allow Voxor picked. The hymnal officer asked with a suspicious voice. Negative, on that. Don't want us involved with any Eldar plots. I answered in a level voice, and Ludvius growled in approval. Teleport detected and redirected, Captain. Is that traitor shooting us with a bolter? Majoris said in disbelief. I glanced at the holoscreen to see the Chaos Astartes receive a warm greeting from an escort corvette, with a few volcano lances that would even damage Titans. The idiot was not wearing a Titan though. Not anymore, I said wisely and began firing the lances at the half-battleship wreck. Then a few seconds later, a flurry of explosions marked the detonations of the torpedoes launched by the Los Angeles destroyers, forming a pretty blue constellation and even damaging a couple enemy destroyers that ventured too close. Well done, destroyers. Form up in pattern delta on the Canticle. Volcano corvettes, Dive and engage the pursuit from behind, I commanded while keeping an eye on the torpedo reload time. Another lance volley and another, all hit the enemy, scouring the adamantium armor and melting the macro batteries of the battleship. Unlike cannons, lances were near-instant weapons at shorter range, and we almost never missed. The reload was slower though, but we wouldn't need ammunition. Lances were still better, in my opinion. But I should try to obtain some Nova cannons. If only a Forge World would be generous enough. Nobody was till now.
Captain, we have loaded the last 6 torpedoes.
Well, except the pretty one with golden words on it.
The head engineer reported in a wry voice. Not calling it a bicycle was an improvement already. I leaned back and consulted with the machine spirit.
We could spare 2 torpedoes for the enemy destroyers, and use 4 right now.
So I did.
The Chaos battleship cracked and ruptured into the void, and another lance volley ignited something important, as it went boom with roaring flames and psychic screams.
They had a ritual going, my lord.
We stopped it just in time. Ludvius muttered in pain, and I turned my head to see him bleeding from his eyes.
Silly traitors. I could have bagged another great demon or something. They were too slow. I complained petulantly, for morale.
Captain Thracius laughed and slapped his knee in mirth, and soon enough the entire bridge crew joined him in hoots and laughter.
We are in position, Captain Peth. Enemy destroyers in pursuit. My uncle announced on the Vox. Break off in pattern beta.
Then wait for the explosions, I said as the Canticle left skid marks on the void, turning the ship's bow towards the pursuers and flying backwards by inertia.
And,
launch. The servitor-guided torpedoes stuck 2 destroyer squadrons head-on and vaporized 2 small targets, also collapsed the void shields of the nearby enemies. Then my fleet started firing our direct beam weapons, popping one Chaos destroyer after another, with the corvette supporting from behind, targeting engines and their exposed backsides. The Eldar cruiser flashed by and scored a few more kills, then vanished under a cloak of illusions and fake augury returns. I decided to ignore it for now, as I had bigger fish to fry. We circled back and began finishing off the crippled destroyers, then incinerated what was left of the corrupted battleship. Adamantium wouldn't quite burn and evaporate, but I was cautious not to try to salvage something that would surely be imprinted with demons or psychic emanations. Perhaps if I had a company of Grey Knights, but those walking purification engines were very rare, secretive and likely busy doing more important work. We still had more repairs to do, and nothing to surprise the Chaos Siege fleet with. But they wouldn't know that, so my own fleet would prevent them from committing to a desperate assault.
Commodore Yorvis, you know the drill.
Largest hull fragments into the sun. I ordered at my destroyer squadron leader, and went back to my room. Then I looked around at the melted walls and furniture, and walked out.
I'm homeless now, I muttered towards Ludvius.
You have 18 ships right here, and those planets in the fringe.
I'm certain we will find a place for you to sleep.
The veteran Astartes said without changing tone, simply flat.
It was a joke, big brother.
I replied in a tired voice, leaning on a blackened wall.
I then voxed my other guard for help.
In a minute, Captain Thracius arrived and led me to his own room, which had been the Scythe's dormitory when there were more of them.
You sleep as well, brother Ludvius. I will keep watch,
my guardian declared and sat beside the door, then started cleaning and oiling his bolter.
I never slept better, being very tired but knowing I was safe.
Even took my armor off, which was not recommended during a yellow alert. Unlike Astartes, who could keep going for a month without sleep, or sleep with an eye open, I was still human and got tired. Much later, I woke up to find a biologist Marcus poking me with 100 sharp instruments.
Common sense priest.
Wake me up for a checkup. I growled and held my hand for a cup of CF.
But Ludvius was missing.
Thracius didn't serve coffee, or even seem to care I was being probed in funny places.
Incorrect, Captain.
It is better to investigate a patient that is sedated or asleep. Less chance I sever an important nerve or leave you sterile because you thrash around.
The Magus declared serenely. Fine.
Sedated yes, asleep no.
I muttered, still groggy.
The priest had some logic,
but I felt violated. And I probably was.
Is this Astartes cleared for my report, Captain? The tech priest continued without care, and took out a holoslate with 100 indexes marked in yellow and green.
I'm slowly turning into a neophyte, Thracius. Probably the work of the angel on Estobon. It already reaches my shoulder. I explained and held my left hand out. The Astartes blinked and stepped closer to grab the holoslate. It should hurt tremendously. And it never starts from the wrist. He mused to himself, while scanning the data on the device. I have participated in the transformation of a few space wolves. The numbers do not lie, Astartes. It is just going very slowly. 1,000 times slower. The biologist Margus replied, a bit offended. Also, I am a blank, so whatever is happening has to overcome my innate resistance. I added, helpful. To warp bullshit, I continued in my mind. Thracius sighed and sat down again, after handing me the slate. It shouldn't work anyway. But miracles keep happening, as the Emperor wills. By the way, there's another fleet parked beside us. Blood Angels, led by an Inquisitor. He explained softly. And they called Ludvius to report? Of course they did. I answered, then turned towards my priest medic. I will need your expertise, Margus. And something to subdue an Inquisitor, if he's corrupted. A few rites of purification and logic cantrips emerged from my doctor. I cannot help, Captain. Only another Inquisitor can. The tech priest began while I walked to my power armor and removed a tiny box in the backpack. Will this help? I asked jovially, holding a rosetta made from a palm-sized coghead, but still inscribed with a capital I. It also contained the necessary Clavis-type engrams and DNA authentications. My rose wasn't stupid, after all. That cyclonic torpedo could only be activated by an inquisitorial rosetta. In this case, my own. In that case, this obedient one will provide chemical and hallucinogenic means to subdue any human without Astartes' organs. Power armor and refractor shields may render them ineffective. He answered in a completely subservient voice. I waved my finger in denial. And, the means to penetrate armor and shields, Margus. The Inquisition is quite dangerous, but I never underestimate the Mechanicus. Some sort of power syringe or such. Then I turned towards Thracius. And you, Astartes, report to the armory and request 3 phase iron bolter rounds, and a separate bolt pistol, I demanded, playing with my unlimited power coin. Understood. He growled and left at a brisk pace. After that, I hid the rosetta again and went back to sleep. Nobody expects the Inquisition. A strong hand woke me up, and I groggily opened an eye. Ludvius, and not very happy. Lord Peth, we should leave, as fast as possible. The Inquisitor is coming here to investigate you. And, he claims that my battle brother Archeo is Sanguinius himself, reborn. The idiots on the barge believe it too. He explained after checking the room for spies or something. Ludvius, my brother from another father. You seem worried, for some reason. Is Librarian Mephiston on board that barge? I asked with another motive. We don't have that name in our ranks, Captain Peth. Perhaps he is not yet born? He asked with curious eyes. Good reasoning, as I asked for a rank as well, and librarians didn't grow on trees. Obviously, if you never heard of him. That guy will indeed contain a part of Sanguinius. Not the left hand, but probably very similar in some aspects. I proclaimed confidently. If Mephiston hasn't appeared yet, there was still time. I should go get the other hand, as soon as my ship could travel through warp. Which meant, I needed this forge world. I started dressing and placing the armor, and Ludvius helped eagerly. In a minute, I started assembling a welcome party in a shuttle hangar, some 30 sentinels and 300 Katakans with heavy weapons and sniper rifles. A squad of Ogrins in full gear took the honor guard place, with their ears blocked. No need to tempt the impressionable giants to the dark gods. And then the Blood Angels arrived, a full company escorting some Inquisitor named Ramius_Steele. Unlike the other Blood Angels, wearing proper red armor, this Archeo was wearing a golden one, like a Primarch. Compared to my own modest dark green and blue armor, he looked like an emperor. Plus, the guy had a holy spear and bloody wings. The Inquisitor had power armor too, because why not? Artificer class, and painted gold and black.
All it was missing were chaos spikes.
Blood angels, move aside and let me speak with my guest, I demanded in my loudest voice.
Rogue Trader Lancefire,
there have been rumors about you.
Rumors that need to be investigated. The Inquisitor interjected, possibly worried about lacking protection. He also tried something psychery, waving his staff at me, but it had no effect. Challenge accepted. A servant of chaos wants to investigate me? Pef Lancefire, who just killed the traitor Lorga, Primarch of the Word Bearers. Laughable. And you Astartes, I gave you an order, I shouted holding out my rosetta. The Astartes stood undecided, while I advanced on the traitor Inquisitor with my guards flanking me.
What? His words were lies?
Archeo yelled and crashed to his knees. Steel tried to grab the spear of Telesto, but a shot from Thracius deflected his impure hand. The phase iron burst on impact and produced a psyker-inhibiting dust cloud, making the traitor fall to his knees from the shock of being depowered. So I just nodded, and watched Ludvius inject the fallen Inquisitor with the Mechonicus contraption. Then I marched forward and confiscated the spear with my left hand, while still holding my rosetta as a shield. Margus, take this idiot Astartes, and see how to repair whatever the corrupt scum has done to him. Some implant in his spine I expect. Meanwhile, Ludvius has begun disarmoring the Inquisitor, and disarming him of too many weapons. Now this was a nice looting opportunity, once I checked all the relics for corruption. The spear seemed light and easy to use with my left hand, but I didn't dare trying with my right, not in public. In the name of the Emperor, I declare you, Ramius Steele, a heretic and a traitor. Excommunicate_traitoris. I proclaimed in a grave voice, and stabbed the tattooed man with my new spear. He was unpowered and sedated anyway, but those chaos spikes on his chest told the real truth. And thus, the traitor died on the very spear he had discovered. There was no explosion or demon jumping out. Just a fool, played with by chaos and left to die ignominiously.